Things I used to do, I don't do no more. Things I used to do, I don't do no more. For the Lord's made a change in me.
This is Real History. I am Melissa. It is the 27th of February. Not really, but that's the day that you will be seeing this. And I am talking today with Sam in Western Australia. And Sam has just come through this really intense, severe tornado warning that he was under with winds of about 200 miles an hour. Now it's passed, but leading right up until close to recording this, we were thinking that no, it might not happen. He might get blown away, but that didn't happen. So, Sam, it is good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, Nelson. Yeah, probably a bit tired from yesterday. I was at it all day, preparing and putting stuff away and everything. But yeah, we should be fine now. It's tracked further eastwards, so I think we're out of the clear. But you never know. They're so unpredictable that they do all kinds of weird things. It's just sitting off the coast at the minute, so it's closer to the next town up the coast, another big iron ore port. So.
Mm-hmm. So we're recording this today, which is a little bit further out from when I'll upload it for a couple of reasons, because I've got a lot going on personally, and also because Sam's got an unusual work schedule where I think you're like 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'll go. Yeah. It's not too bad.
And you work in the oil fields, right?
It's gas transmission.
Gas.
So we ship gas through pipelines. So big pipes, high pressures, long distances.
Yeah.
So we look after that infrastructure. There's a network of pipelines up here.
How long have you been doing that?
Directly for 5 years. And I've lived up here for 15 years and worked around different. I did field service for years, looking after compressors and other things in mining and some gas stuff. And I worked offshore for a little bit. But yeah, doing this role directly for 5 years. I quite enjoy it because you're out bush most of the time and there's nobody to annoy you, you know.
Do you like that better than offshore?
Yeah, it's I did offshore for a little bit, but I prefer this, you know. There's less people around and the work's a lot more varied. Like probably some work as a mechanical technician, but most of your work, there'd be like 60% of it's operations, so you just keeping the joint running, doing a few things, and then you've got a bit of mechanical work, and then the rest like handyman work. You can be doing like pulling weeds and fixing toilets and taps. Yeah, so it's a lot of variety, and I like that. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I found some jobs I can get bored quite easily. So
yes, I have I get bored for sure. So your crew that you're with is fairly small?
Yeah, there's how many is there? There'd be 8 technicians. It's mainly excuse me, mainly electricians and a few mechanical techs. To look after.
So what's the setup when you're on crew? Do you have like a dormitory kind of thing? Does somebody cook for you?
No, so we've got gas compressor stations. So roughly every 150 kilometers there'll be a compressor station to keep pushing the gas downstream, and on those sites there are accommodation blocks like call them dongers in Australia, but they're like portable accommodation. And what we have in our vehicles are a big fridge, so you do your big food shop and then you do all your cooking yourself.
Ah,
It's
I
not too
see.
bad, is it?
Yeah. No, that is nice. So it really is a kind of a loner operation when you're.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no catering staff or anything. So.
And where are you from originally? You told me, so this isn't just for people who are listening or watching it, but you told me, but I forgot. So,
Yeah, I'm from Yorkshire originally, so I've
right.
been in Australia 16 years now. So I've spent nearly all that time in the Pilbara, which is in the far northwest of Australia.
And Yorkshire is that James Herriot, All Creatures Great and Small, the veterinarian series country, or do you know that the
Yeah, I
Yorkshire
know.
Dales and
Yeah, I had his book when I was growing up. There's James Herriot, the vet. Yeah, traveling vet.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that's more North Yorkshire. I'm sort of.
Oh,
I was
okay.
born and raised on the border between East and West Yorkshire.
Okay.
So it's mainly in heavy industry, mining, and farming. But obviously, all that's gone. The majority of
Yeah.
it's gone. The heavy industry. So it was a really deprived area, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things I remember growing up, and you got told all this stuff. The British Empire, it ruled a third of the world or whatever, and then you think to yourself, well, where did that money go? Because it didn't go up here. A very poor area, and you can tell in a place where the optimism's just gone. It's just subsistence basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it probably would have been the same where Alan was from, post deindustrialization, where he was.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he was from a coal mining town. I think it was. He
Mm-hmm.
must have been
Mm-hmm.
Ayrshire or somewhere like that, was it?
No, I have never said where
Yeah.
he's from, just because he never did. But Highlands. So,
Yeah.
and it was a small town, and most everybody was a miner where he grew up. Was your dad in mining or heavy industry
He was
when
in
there
heavy
was such a
industry.
thing?
Yeah, he was. Well, he kept working throughout. Cause he was a rigger, steel erector, so he worked on power stations and stuff. But yeah, he left when I was 18 months or whatever, so I never seen him again. So I just grew up with my mum and my
Really?
brother. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, but my mum,
Never saw him again.
I did see him. It would have been 2016, maybe. See, he went and retired in Spain, so I went over there to see him. First time I'd seen him. That was interesting.
Wow. That would be interesting. What was it like to see him?
Yeah, it was a bit strange, really. Like, typical thing. He never contacted me throughout growing up or even paid maintenance, And one of the questions, I wanted to get it from the horse's mouth if he did do that, And he said, "Yeah, I never did," and he was quite proud of the fact how he got around not paying it. So he made himself redundant and got the. He said, "I showed the judge my UB40, which, as you know, there was a band named after it. That's your Dole certificate." So I was like, "All right, yeah." So it got a little bit heated, but yeah.
That's it. I never knew that UB40 meant the Dole certificate.
Yeah, that's where the band got the
Yeah.
name. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I assumed it was like a submarine or a missile or something.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Like
Yeah.
the B-52s.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, so that would be weird. I mean, it says a bit about him that he would even think that was cool to kind of brag about that to you.
Yeah, it was it was quite, how would you say it, confronting. But at least you know where you stand then, you know.
Did he remarry and start another family, or just he wasn't into that with anybody?
No, so he got with another lady, but never had any more kids. But he had prior to my mum and that marriage, he had 3 children with another woman, so 2 boys and a girl. And it was through one of the sons, that Nigel, that he got me back in touch with him. For some reason, he wanted to contact me again. So
Interesting.
yeah.
So your mother was left with you and your brother. You're 18 months old. What did she do to keep it together for you?
Just growing up on a council estate and state housing, you know, in those places aren't the best. They're good for your character, though. You grow up pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very poor. And there's no in those areas. There's not many ways out of that, you know. If you, go to school and uni and what have you. But so I did do that. Went to school and college and did a diploma in automotive engineering, then worked at a workshop. And then I was gonna go to uni to do a automotive degree, but kind of got sick of education. So then I decided to join the military. So I went to the recruiting office, and I was like, initially I wanted to join the Navy as a marine engineer, or a stoker as they call it. And the Navy are a bit more smart about how they do it. Well, they were back then. This is 2003, I think. They wait quite a while to do your basic training, then you do that and then straight onto your trade course. Whereas the army, they'll get you in a month or 2, you know, and you'll do your basic and then you'll wait around to do a trade course. So that's what I ended up doing, joining the army as a vehicle mechanic.
Oh, interesting. How long were you in the army?
I stayed in 5 years. So I did. You only have to do 4. I did an extra year. Kind of got sick of that a bit. Yeah.
Were you posted in the UK the whole time, or were you?
No, so after I finished my trade training, my first posting was Germany. So I was posted there for 2.5 years in the north of Germany. And that was good. But during that time, I went to Iraq. So I did a tour of Iraq.
How was that?
Yeah, it was busy. It was different.
Yeah.
It was because we was out a fair bit, and you just more or less just waiting to get attacked or roadside bombs or whatever, you know. And there was a bit of that went on. And when you were back in camp, you'd get mortared and stuff, or Chinese rocket attacks, what they used to use. But yeah, it was. So we were in Basra area, all the British forces. Yeah, it was pretty eye-opening. It was an interesting thing I thought about when I was there. So, what happens is they do 6-7 months, and then the brigades rotate through, and each brigade brings all its own equipment in, so all vehicles, everything. But as the vehicles land, and you've got to up armor them, modify them, and everything, I was thinking to myself, why would you not leave them in theatre and then keep them there? But I'm guessing there was some kind of scam going with the shipping, because at the end of every tour, the Yeah, all the gear gets shipped back to Germany or the UK or wherever. So it just didn't make sense, you know. So it's got to be some kind of scam with the shipping. Somebody must have got rich off it big time. Because we used to have drivers with us from KBR, you know, Kellogg, Brown and Root, the part of Halliburton, and they'd employ Bangladeshis drivers, paying them nothing, you know, and they're driving unarmored trucks and no electronic countermeasures or anything, and quite a few of them got taken out, you know. So, well, the companies like Halliburton and that then would have been making a fortune there.
That's interesting. I mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say the contrast between the Americans and the British, like, because we used to go to some American bases and you go to a British cookhouse for your dinner or whatever, and it'd be like one choice off the hot plate, one dessert. You go to the American ones, I've never seen anything like it, like a big 4 meter squared table just of condiments, and then big freezers full of ice creams and everything. I just couldn't believe it. The money that they must have spent.
I had a friend years ago, and he was a bit older than I was, but he had worked in London for a while, and I'm trying to think of what era this would be, but probably the very early 70s, I'm thinking. And there was a fair bit of depression, economic depression going on, whatever. But, you know, so he's an American. And he was also born and raised in New York City. And there's a lot of money floating around New York City and whatever. So he gets over to London and he goes into a sandwich shop. And he said, I want a ham and cheese sandwich. And the clerks just didn't even know what he was saying. And they're like, we can make you a ham sandwich. He said, no, I want a ham and cheese sandwich. She said, well, we can make you a cheese sandwich. And he said, I want them together. I want a ham and cheese sandwich. And she said, well, we don't do that. You can have ham between bread, or you can have a piece of cheese between bread. And he said, okay, give me 2 sandwiches. I'll take a ham sandwich and a cheese sandwich. You know, and he made his own ham and cheese. But he said to an American who was used to at that time just all these choices and anything that you want, and you know what America was like between World War II and probably right before, you know, because once the oil recession hit and then the 80s and the crash, and you know, then they got everybody on credit and slowly they brought people down, but still, yeah. But that's Britain, you know. No, I'm sorry, you can have a ham sandwich. That's it.
Well, you get.
And it's like, you know, Alan always talked about the military and how he said the Americans were just bigger because they were fed all this meat.
Yeah, there seemed to be, yeah. One thing we did notice was they didn't really have the wit and the humour that the Brits have. Like you could run rings around them and take the mick out of them. They wouldn't even realise, you know. I found that. It must be a British thing because the Aussies and the Kiwis, you're on the same level, but the Americans, they just didn't seem to be right. Well, they used to call us the borrowers in Iraq, yeah, because they were always getting kit off them and stuff, you know.
Really?
Yeah, so that's the Yanks called us the borrowers, yeah.
Yeah. That's very funny. It reminds me of did you ever see Dad's Army, the sitcom? Yeah, I love Dad's Army, but there was the episode where the Brits and the Yanks met up at the bar and they kind of have a fight and they're fighting it out. But the main thing was the Yanks just really rubbing it into the Brits. Oh, you don't have that? You don't have the, you know, they're just like, And then they were hit, and I think that there's a fair bit of truth to this. The soldiers were hitting up on all the local girls because, you know, they came loaded with silk stockings and perfume and chocolate. I mean, so their kit was quite complete.
There's a fair bit of that. I know one of my mum's friends, she similar age to my mum, or probably a bit older. She's gone now, but where we moved to, and I grew up in a little village, there was an air base there, and World War II, there was American airmen there, and she was a result of one of those relationships. Her dad was an American airman,
Yeah. No, there was so much more of that, and I tell you what, they were not liked because of that. Yeah.
Well, I think even in
Because
Australia, I think there was an instance in Fremantle where once the Aussies had got back, Fremantle's just south of Perth, the big naval area around there, and once the Aussies had come back, this is in World War II, there was a lot of trouble because what had been going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Alan's never told this story, and maybe I shouldn't either, but I'll leave it very, very vague. But the whole reason that Alan ended up in Canada in the first place is because of a story just like that. Because he had an uncle that got back from the war, and his wife either was pregnant or had a little baby or whatever, but the timing, it was very clear it wasn't his, you know.
All right.
So, yeah. So he said, well, have fun with that child that is not mine. I'm going to Canada. So that, you know, then Alan had a relative, he had a family member in Canada, and when he was, you know, kind of traveling around and thinking of what he wanted to do, that's how he ended up there, the fallout of World War II.
Yeah, there was an awful lot of Scots emigrated to Canada back in the day, weren't there?
Yeah.
Seemed to be one of the places, and then same in Britain. I think from the 60s you had the £10 POMs where Australia encouraged emigration to here from Britain, and it was just £10. That's what you had to pay, and the Australian government paid the rest.
Wow.
So they were called the £10 POMs. That's a phrase that Aussies have for Brits.
I like that. So how did you end up making that move? What was it that?
Yeah, so I kind of got sick of the army, and I just wanted to go elsewhere. I didn't want to leave and go back to that area where I was from. So whilst I was in the army, I looked into emigrating out here. So I went through an agency and went through the skilled migration path as a mechanic, and I just came out here. Obviously, it costs you a lot of money, trade tests and all the other stuff, and then came out here at the start of 2009. I just came out by myself. I didn't have anywhere to go or a job to go to. I just had a backpack, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, and met some people and that, and you can get on, can't you, if you. But I sort of came out just as after the GFC, so it weren't the best time to find work as such, I ended up doing a few random jobs. I worked on a farm.
What's the GFC?
I remember the global financial crash, 2008.
Oh, the GFC. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know it. I didn't know that's. I didn't know it had an acronym. Okay, good.
Yeah, so it was around that time, so everything was a bit depressed, and the economy weren't too good here. So I worked on a farm for a bit out bush, and then came back to Perth because I moved to Perth, and I couldn't find work anywhere. especially when you're fresh off the boat, you know, and you don't have a really good resume. So then I ended up working at this egg farm in a grading room. It was boxing eggs, but the eggs were boxed. You just had to put them in bigger boxes, you know. Oh, it was minimum wage and that, but it was good fun.
Yeah. So, what made you pick Perth as opposed to, I don't know, Sydney or anywhere else?
Probably for one of my uncles. He lived over here in would have been early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But he always liked Perth, so I thought, oh, just try Perth, you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's in Perth. It's got the highest population of Brits outside of Britain.
Really?
Yeah, so there's some northern and southern suburbs that are just, you know, it's full of them. But I didn't really go for that. I just thought I'd give it a go, and I ended up moving up north to the Pilbara with my ex-girlfriend, and ended up staying up here because it's a 2-hour flight or a 17-18 hour drive from Perth if you drive up here.
Wow.
And you pass about, once you get north of Perth, you go through about 3 towns and that's it. There's not a lot. Very remote.
So you're really remote. Yeah.
Here on the coast, it can be humid, and a couple of spots where I work, not too far inland, but there's one spot and you're regularly touching 50, 51, 52, yeah. So
That's hot.
It's pretty brutal, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's intense. But you like it. You're happy.
Yeah, I don't mind it, yeah. It's been, because I told you before, we had another tropical low roll past a couple of weeks back, and that we got 12-inch of rain within like 6 hours or something. So ever since then, it's been, real verdant and green, but the humidity's been sky high. So you go outside, you're just saturated all the time. Now that's worse than the hot, dry heat. You can handle a 40-degree day easy if it's dry, but when you got humidity as well, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I know. The humidity is hard to deal with. It really is. I liked the Southern California heat as opposed, because it gets a fair bit humid here in the summer, and if it, when it's 40 or 44 degrees here, you just don't want to move. But if it's dry, if that comes with no moisture, that's not bad at all.
No, it's manageable. You just need a bit of shade, but you can't escape the humidity in the shade, can you?
No, no. So how did you, and when did you start to question reality the way that it was given? Were you always a kind of doubter of the narrative?
Yeah, I reckon all throughout growing up, I always had an inquiry mind, and was into a few things growing up, UFOs and ghosts and other things. And like you say, I had a few thoughts of where you grew up. Like the reality doesn't fit their narrative, of this country and one of the richest countries in the world. And it's like, well, I don't see it here, but then, so when obviously 9/11 happened and the 7/7 bombings, and I was in the military during that time, and you knew when you joined the military you're going to end up in Iraq or Afghanistan. So then left and came over here, and it's probably over here when you think you woke up, sort of thing. I remember it was quite funny because I went to Bali one time and I got this knockoff video of, you know, the Michael Moore Fahrenheit 9/11, and that made me. It's, you know, it's pretty low level stuff looking back now, but it was an eye opener at the time how much of a scam and a joke that was. And yeah, then after that, he sort of ended up getting you know, watching the Zeitgeist movies and all that stuff, and getting into that, and InfoWars back then. And I lived with a lad, Evan. We're still good mates now, and he was into that. So he was getting me into the, you know, conspiracy, if you want to call it that, view of history, and went from there. And I was trying to think the other day where I actually first came across Alan. I can't remember a date, unless I came across him through Alex Jones, because he used to be on there a fair bit, didn't he? I don't know if that would have been around that time, 2010. I think he may have been.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then,
I mean, I think many of the times that he was on, well, he started the earliest one. I can't remember how far back that goes. 7 for sure, maybe even 2006. But I think 8 and 9 were kind of the height of how many shows that he did with Alex.
Yeah, so then came across, I think it would have been through InfoWars or whatever, and then started following his stuff. And at the time I had a similar field service job where I'm in the car, or the ute as we call it over here, a pickup truck, for doing 12-hour shifts, but a lot of driving in between. So I just downloaded all Alan's stuff and listened to everything right back from the start. You know, you're talking 6-7 hours between places sometimes. So all I'd listened to was Alan's stuff, and then I started emailing Alan and asking him some questions, and that was quite a few years back now. And sort of message back and forth. I was probably messaging you at one bit.
Yeah. He did see it. I made sure, you know, he liked to know what was going on.
Yeah, I shared a few things that were going on I thought he might be interested in, but he was one of the few at the time who had a cool head, and he was just matter of fact. This is what's happening. This is why it's happening. This is how it's happening. And he weren't ranting and raving and carrying on, because, you know, that's just entertainment and that kind of stuff. I wanted the info, you know, the data. Then started reading the books, buying the books that Alan said, Anglo-American Establishment, all those Carol Quigley books, and the Zbigniew Brzezinski books, Jacques Attali, and the ones by Anthony Sutton and John Coleman as well. So I was flat out reading them all the time, and I always said, like, Alan give you like an apprenticeship in the way the world actually works, and you know how things actually happen, not just the facade you get on the media, you know.
Yeah. I was thinking, it's just I've been so busy lately, and I'll take a look to see who's saying what and what's going on. And last night it crossed my mind, it doesn't really matter, you know. You try to keep up and think of, you know, well, so-and-so did this today, and we're doing the, you know, Israel said that if they don't release those final hostages, then the ceasefire's off. And you go, well, that's really shocking. You know, that's just so surprising. So at the end of the day, you don't need all of that so-called news and information. You just need to have the framework of what it means, how to, you know, and then you can interpret it all for yourself. So Alan really is, he's not, I mean, he's just the primer but it's also like, or a foundation, but it's also, no, you just keep going back there because anybody else has got a twist or a spin or that thing you find that, what they're ranting and they're telling you that that you look at this and think about this, and then at the end of the day they just want you voting. So they've got you in their system, and I think most news, probably 99% of what we're given, is ultimately designed just to keep you in that system, thinking it's all real, thinking that it's, your side's really going to do something and it's going to pivot and turn the other direction. And in a way, if you do look at things on that level, there's a little bit of change, one party does seem to do this and then the other party does that. But if you step back, it's just theater.
Yeah, well, they've got to do that, and they've got to show supposed change, or else people won't buy into it. So they've got to have little victories and little, oh, he's making a difference now, And see, I told you, the system is real and it does work. You just need to get the right guy in or girl, and they can make all the difference. But I just look at the trajectory, and you see where it's going. It's like, yeah, they're still ticking the boxes. You're still going towards your digital prison and all the rest of it. You might get a few crumbs thrown at you going, oh, we've got a victory here. They've got rid of the woke stuff and this, that, and the other. But in the meantime, they're signing all these bills into law with the digital shackles and you're getting monitored all the time, all the rest of it. But I think
it's...
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, like, with Trump, the Messiah, he's been... you can see he's thrown some red meat out of his base. Oh, he's really doing it. And then in the background, you look at the other stuff he's doing on it. It doesn't really get reported. And it's just business as usual. It's the agenda moving forward the way it was always going to do. But you've got this sideshow to keep people engaged, thinking it is real,
Yeah, it's there's so many things about this particular show that's going on right now with DOGE, with Musk and the government efficiency, and we're going to fire all these people and we're going to cut these salaries, and then just crazy things that Trump says, like, well, let's relocate everybody from Gaza and we're going to rebuild it, and the things that are designed to get people going. He can't do that, and so it really becomes just a show. And then for everything that he says he's going to stop or cut salaries or whatever, then you've got judges saying, oh, that's not constitutional, you can't do that. So the government efficiency says, okay, we're going to stop that. And then the court says, oh, you can't do that. So it's wrestling. It's constantly flexing and tough talk and trash talk, and you're going, no, go, so you really are ringside for this big show. But it, like you say, it's business as usual, because what seems to be happening is we're more and more shackled with artificial intelligence taking away our jobs, scrutiny and surveillance that is constant. We're under the most intense warfare all the time. That never changes. And I know Alan would say it's always been that way. It's always been that way. It's not like it's more that way now, or, the stakes seem higher to me, but maybe that's not even true. It's just always been this way, that we're slaves. Maybe they want fewer of us right now, so they do some culling. maybe they want a lot fewer of us so we can look and see this event we've lived through for the past 5 years. What's the fallout on that? Maybe even more culling, you know, but maybe it has just always been that way. One talk I put up recently, and I don't remember which one it is, but somebody said, "Oh, that's excellent." Alan said, "We're the most informed slaves that ever lived." And I think that's probably true. There's a perception amongst some people that there was a kind of a mass awakening that happened around Operation C, that more people understood that their rights were being taken away from them, and they stood up and they went out and protested, and they said, "Oh, you can't do that." But I think it really comes down to that. We're just the most informed slaves that ever were. Is the tide turning? Is there a wrench and a spanner in the works? I don't think so. It really does seem to be progressing right on schedule.
Yeah, I think you're saying the protest with the sea stuff just because it was, like Alan used to allude to in the past, because it physically, personally affected people. So then they'll do something. But you could have told them everything that was going on prior to that, and yeah, whatever, you know. But when it's personally affecting them, then they'll do something about it. I think that's why we saw that then. And now what's happened more or less afterwards, now they've dialed it right back. People have just gone back to normal, you know, business as usual, back to wrestling, World Wrestling Federation politics and all the rest of it. So yeah, it has woken a lot of people up, and you've got a lot more people calling it out, but the vast majority haven't, you know.
Mm-hmm. There's something that I was listening to pretty recently, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, but we you know, they'll never be able to do this again or take it further, because everybody now knows what happened to them, and they understand what happens to them." But I think you've just said it. They're back to their ringside seats for the, you know, wrestling politics, and that they like took the little lull that we appear to be in as a sign that, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. I don't have to take this. There's nothing to protest here. You know what I mean? And so that's not awakening to an ancient system. That's just reacting to something that's happened to you now. Because if they ease up just a little bit, and so you're not locked down, and you don't have to wear something every time you know, go out in public, or you know, your job is not threatened because you haven't complied with something. That doesn't mean that your rights haven't been trampled all over and are continuing to be trampled on. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you don't see it because it doesn't hurt quite so much. You know, it doesn't pinch as much, so you don't notice you've got a manacle on your ankle, but you still do. And that's the thing. I think maybe that part, you know, people always say, well, how do I know where I am? How do I know if I'm awake or whatever? It's if you always understand that you're manacled. And nothing anybody says, oh no, that's not true, you're not a slave, can change that, because you've seen it. You can see enough of the system to understand that you don't really have freedom in the system. I was listening to somebody talk the other day that's kind of it was putting a positive, here's what you can do to help yourself. We're going into these intense changes right now, this bio-digital convergence thing, this fourth industrial revolution, and here's what you can do. Just don't take the technology inside of you. because technology is maybe not bad, but if you don't take it inside of you, then you're pure human. You're still 100% human. And it's like, technology doesn't work that way. You know, the encroaching on your humanity and the changes that it makes in you, even biologically, they happen from the moment that the new technology enters your environment at all. You're changed by it. And Alan would say, I think that example of nobody had a television in his small area. And so everyone would go to the park with their family, husbands, wives, children, and that you'd see them on the weekend. And the moment that the television was introduced to the area, and then everyone had one in the home, he said it was just like night and day. As that area got flooded with the televisions, which happened just like that, then nobody went to the park anymore. Well, that has made those people less human. They're not engaging with each other face to face. They're not out in nature. The children aren't playing. They're sitting in front of the television. So everything changes us, and has for, generations. So it's almost like the thing that you got with the religious people around Operation C, the whole mark of the beast, that something that was going to be maybe put into you was going to change you biologically or stamp you. In other words, it was going to show, even the part of the military operation that gave that patent with 666 and, in the VOT, that's like, okay, really?
Yeah.
But really, they did. So it's always people saying, well, I've complied, I went along, I did, but I stopped just shy of that thing, whatever that is, And I think it's probably always been that way. So it's kind of the balance is almost like always being in a state of saying no, no, no. No, I don't want
Yeah,
that.
well,
No.
they say that they don't want the mark on the forehead, but they still carry around that black rectangle, don't they? So I got a good story about what you just said, similar to what Alan said with the TVs. So in my previous job, where I was traveling everywhere throughout mining and other things, you'd always have to do these inductions, the site safety inductions.
Mm-hmm.
And I started before smartphones were ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd go for these inductions and you'd be there boring, going through the same stuff all the time. And then they say, right, you have 15-minute smoke or a coffee or whatever. And it'd be a rabble as soon as you got a break, because people would be talking, what are you doing? Just that raucous room full of different chats going on. And then like a year or two later, once everybody got smartphones, say, right, have your break. And you could hear a pin drop because everyone's scrolling. You thought this is like 2010, 2011 or whatever, 2012. Once they become really, everyone had one. And just that, I just noticed that just night and day, like prior to that, everybody's talking and it's gone within a year. That's a massive change.
It is.
And you've lost that.
And it's you have, and that is not just a societal, cultural, community change or something. I believe it's actually a fundamentally biologically, psychologically altered versus what's closer to being a real human. So it's incremental. It's Fabian style, it's incremental, these slow little changes until think about what you're just describing there. If you put those down in your grandparents' generation, so they would go out and have their meeting and then go have their smoke break, or they'd be talking. And you just transported them through time to that situation, how alien that would be. So they didn't see the slow progress, and they don't have the smartphone in their hands. Just to
Yeah,
see.
yeah. And I've often thought, like, the attack on smoking, I know this sounds a bit bad, but, you know, I smoke now and again, but you found out if you go outside and have a cigarette, then the conversations you have with people are not just surface level, you know, so that was one of the reasons I thought, is that why they want to get rid of smoking as well? Because it's a chance for random people to interact, you know, they've got a common thing, they both stood there having a cigarette. Then you spark up these random conversations, don't you? And probably don't want that either, you know.
Yeah. It's
Well,
well,
I've
the
had
whole
to train.
smoking thing.
No, sorry, you go ahead, Melissa.
No, no. Well, I was just gonna, I don't want you to lose your train of thought there, but the whole smoking thing is really interesting because you have to question, these are the people who really want you to die. We know they want to depopulate us,
Yeah,
but they're so concerned about that. You know what I mean?
yeah, exactly.
It becomes a war on smoking. So then you have to really go, well, what's the real motive here? Are you so concerned when the cancer skyrocketing everywhere else? Are you so concerned about my lung health? I don't think so. Now,
Yeah.
do you remember what you were going to say about your?
Yeah, this is back to the black rectangles, you know, in people's hands. So we got an apprentice at work, and I've had new starters that I've had to train, and they're both a lot younger than me, in their 20s, early 20s, and they just cannot put the phone down. And you're trying to teach people, and they'll ask you a question, oh, how do you do this, and how does this work, and you'll be showing them something. Next minute, you're looking and they're scrolling through the photos. Oh my god! And I got, you know, a bit upset with the apprentice. I'm teaching him stuff, and he's checking his. Oh, I just need to check. I says, you don't. You pay to work, man. Not look through your phone, and they just can't do it. Physically, it's changed them that much that they need that. You know, it's just mental. Because I used to go prospecting a fair bit, metal detecting for gold, and I'd go out bush for a month at a time, and there'd be no signal service or anything unless I had to drive a few k's and drive up on a hill to send a text message. But it's just bliss, you know, none of that stuff. And you could get the AM radio if you wanted, but it's like nah. And it's strange, eh? If you live out in the bush for weeks at a time, your sleep patterns, everything changes. As soon as the sun goes down, you 7 o'clock or whatever, you might as well just go to sleep. You know, it's you turn more back to how we should be, I suppose. You know, without all the other external stimuluses. You've only got nature. You know, the birds chirping will wake you up, and you know you don't need an alarm clock.
That's yeah. That is interesting. That kind of quiet, and but people can't do it. You know that, and it's all technology. If you just remind yourself how things used to be, or earlier, or at a different phase in your life, like before the internet. Amazing, but there was a time before the internet, but the radio would be something that I'd notice. If I'd be riding with a friend, they couldn't be driving in their car without the radio on. And I like to drive. I've always liked driving. I like to go a great distance and look and see what I'm seeing, and just have the, pleasure of my own company. So I don't like the radio when I'm driving, because when I'm driving, I'm driving. And that whole morning thing. So, but what you notice again, this whole idea, well, the technology is okay as long as you don't put it in your body, as long as you don't ingest it or inject it or whatever. It's like, no, I couldn't listen to that chatter, that crazy male and female DJ radio thing as you drive to work, and they're just talking utter rubbish, just
It's garbage,
nonsense,
yeah.
and couldn't handle it. But that's it. Or I've gone to people's homes and they're making a dinner and they've got a little television in the kitchen. It's like, well, what are you? Are you watching TV or are you cooking? Yeah.
It's just background noise. Yeah, they can't live without it. I work with a guy because we did this work for the same company, so we're driving everywhere. And he's like, "Oh, I've got to have the music on when I'm driving." I was like, "Why?" He says, "Oh, I start thinking all this random stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, those are your thoughts, mate. You know, like you just roll with." And he couldn't handle it.
I like that. Those are your thoughts. He's just like, no.
He was saying, like, he's been serious. Like, all this random stuff comes into my head. I'm like, yeah, that's your thoughts. Just see where they go, you know.
Oh, that's priceless. No, they can't. You know, some talk of Alan's that I put up earlier. Well, it's earlier this year. Last year at some point, he was saying, you know, they always say that the kingdom of heaven is within, and you know, so if the kingdom of heaven is within and you can't stand the silence in your, you know, and or the activity in your own head, how are you going to get there, you suppose? You know, what is that going to look like if you can't, you know, just tune that out and let yourself go?
Well, the cat,
It's too scary.
now there's, like you say, with the internet and everything, is non-stop entertainment, and it's anything you want whenever you want, you know. So you remember before when we just had the TV, it was you wanted to watch this show, so you had to prep for it and be there at that time, so or else you missed it. Now you can just get it whenever. So it's just as Alan used to say, you'll sell your soul for convenience, won't you? You know.
Yeah, that's true. And I could live without it. You know, did you ever see that movie that Mel Gibson was in? It was about World War One. It was called Gallipoli.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
awful. Yeah,
yeah. But I mean, just heartbreaking story. But
two
I love
boys
the
from
scene.
they were from Western Australia, weren't they? The two boys who were
Yeah.
like champion runners. Yeah, it's the industrial slaughter.
It
Sorry, what was you
shows
saying about the
you.
scene? The scene you
Well,
was
no, I mean, I'll get back to the scene, but you know that whole thing there too is it shows you the way war really works. It's attrition. You know, you see that all the time. They're just the Smiths or the Jones or whatever. They're completely disposable. And that's what you saw in World War One, that trench warfare, where they knew how that many of them, maybe even most of them, every time they got up out of the trench to go onto the field, most of them were going to get gunned down almost immediately. Can you imagine even living with that? You know, it's like it's your turn to get up and go, and the chances of making it, it's just awful. But anyway, when the two young boys decide that they are going to go and enlist and do their part, this is what they want to do. They're walking across the desert, the outback, and they come upon this old man that is obviously a bit of a loner. I think he was a prospector. That's the character he was playing. He was just mining for gold or whatever. And it was just the old man and his horse or whatever. And they've run out of water and they're really suffering. And he comes upon him and he's like, "Well, son, you're in trouble here." And he's helping him out. But when they come to and he kind of helps him and everything, he's, "Well, what are you doing out in the middle of nowhere?" And what? So, "Well, we're going to go and to the army, and there's a war going on." And he said, "Oh, really?" You know, he said, "Well, what's that?" "Oh, the Krauts, you know," and they go on to say what's a horrible thing is happening. And he goes, the old man is just happy. He said, "Well, I don't know. So I'm living my life, and none of that affects me." And that really, when you're disconnected from the constant news cycle, the need to know what's going on, because if you don't, Trump said, you don't know that, you don't know what Trump and Musk said today. Well, what planet are you on? I'm on the planet of my own thoughts and in my head, and it's pretty real, and I like it here. Oh, but you gotta, there's a war going on. You gotta go do your part. So the old guy's just kind of showing them, and the old man says to him, he goes, I don't know, man, the Germans never did anything to me.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
A good scene, a good skit from Bill Hicks when he said about the news. And you turn the news on, there's bombs and bullets, everything's blowing up, and he says you go outside and all you can hear is crickets. But yeah, back to World War One. My great granddad, he was in World War One, but he was towards the end, so it was after the early drafts, because he was in his 30s when he went. So they cleaned out all the young lads from the the PALS battalions in the north of England and then working class towns. And then they started going for the older blokes, We did a battlefield tour when we did basic training. That we went over to Belgium and that, and it's hard to imagine the scale, of here's the Kayfave regiment or whatever, all the fellas from Kayfave, and the Somme happens, and within an hour, most of the town's men are gone. That had to be a cold, innit? World War One just don't make sense any other way.
It doesn't make sense, and that was another thing that Alan pointed out. Every town in Great Britain had the cenotaph. It's really kind of a obelisk.
Obelisk, yeah. Sean Ross will tell you about them, yeah. He's right, though. Yeah. Every town and village you go through, and there's just this roll of names. Now, I went to some of the big memorials when we went there, and you can find people with the same surname as you, and he's just, he's the same, like my granddad.
Families.
All towns gone within an hour, It was something like the Somme was 20,000 men within the first hour or something. 20,000, an entire town just gone. But my granddad, he ended up in World War II. He was in Burma he was in the Chindik campaigns, and him and his cousin Herbert, they went to join up or whatever. And they showed him all these propaganda videos of the Germans and the Japanese, especially the Germans, and they showed this invincible force, and my granddad's like, oh, should we just give up now, But he ended up in Burma, and he was there for 5 years or something, and lost, he got malaria and all sorts. And when he came back, obviously started a family, had 6 kids, my mum being one of them. And his youngest son, the first car he bought was a Datsun Laurel, so a Japanese car. After my granddad had been over there, and my granddad was a smart fella. He just goes, "Oh yeah, times change." So he did buy a British car, but yeah, he never really talked about it that much. But he died quite young. He said, "Oh, I left my retirement in Burma, in the jungle."
How old was he when he died?
60. He would have been 66, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what happened at World War II, especially with the British, is they barely, they couldn't even farm during World War II except to get all the women on the field, because a whole generation had been wiped out. So it's not just that, the men, they're men that can't produce then, but family farms just disintegrated because there was nobody there to do the farming anymore. And the effort that Britain had to go through just to feed itself as a country during World War II was a pretty amazing story, because 20 years later, they're doing it again.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah, like I know a lot of that generation that went through that, like my grandma's age and them. I know a few of them were in the land army, they called it, where they got the women and they worked on the lands. And I think my grandma, she worked in a paper mill, but her sister, who was telling you, my Aunt Madge, who died the other year, she got sent to Coventry or to work in a munitions factory. So she went down there, and I think they used to call them the Canaries, the women, because all the cordite and stuff had turned them yellow. They went yellow from the chemicals. Yeah. So she went there, and obviously Coventry got hammered, bombed to bits. It's a different world. And then when you think subsequently what was the fight all about, because it didn't benefit Britain really, did it? Or Europe for that matter, it's just gotten worse.
Now, it's an interesting thing too, because especially after World War II, Britain's basically socialist then at the end of the war. So they politically a lot closer to the people that they were fighting than before the war started. And so it's always a different reason that the war is being fought. I think primarily it's all about resources. Once you start to look at a story closely enough, you go, oh, there's minerals, there's, it's resources, or the land is, geographically significant for something that they want down the road. But the second biggest thing always seems to be the culture changes that they can bring about through war.
Massive, yeah. I was reading something. It's about the French Revolution, but it's the same thing. After you go through the war phase, you cannot, I think it's just from Robespierre or someone, you cannot let the society revert back to the pre-conflict or war culture. You can't let them do that. You've got to keep going. And obviously they could get far more done during a period of war, because people allow them to take liberties, because we've got to do this for the war effort. I mean, it was the same thing with the last scam we've just been through. For the greater good, we need to do this and we need to. But then it's, people are quick to forget, aren't they? And that's the new normal, and they've moved along. It's like snakes and ladders, isn't it? They've shot up a ladder there and they've pushed them along a bit further. Then they'll dial it back. You feel with social media and everything, it's even easier for them, because they've got real-time feedback of people's perceptions, so they'll be able to push their agendas so close to the wire without too much pushback, and know exactly when to dial it back and when they can push a bit harder.
Let me ask you a question. Maybe we're too close in time still to even make an assessment like that, but 5 years later, what do you think were the biggest societal changes that have come out of this latest operations?
Yeah, it's an interesting one in Australia. I mean, what would have been the biggest?
Well, the thing from like Robespierre would say, there's no going back, a change so significant, and there's no going back from it?
It's, I don't know if this was an intended consequence, because the way I've found it here is because Australia had it good and prosperous for a long time, the people, this may be intended so they can bring someone in down the track, but the thing I found is that people were more trusting the government here. Like the government did something and worked for them, not like Britain where people are just used to getting shafted all the time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It was, so they were innocent to the fact what governments can be and do, you know? So when that happened, and, you know, we had it was same as Canada, where you had state premiers basically becoming their own kings of their own kingdoms, and they locked everyone up and we're protecting, you know, and then they started forcing people to take things, and then that's when it sort of hit home with people. It's like, wow, you know, the government's not all good. And so since then seems to be more mistrust in government, but did they intend that to happen? I don't know. As it get to a point where you mistrust them so much that they'll say, well, here's an alternative, you know. You know, that's what, because it seemed like, did they push too hard, and they're just, you know, you got mediocre people running these things, or was that an intended consequence to create so much distrust? You sort of getting into Bezmenov territory there, where you create the crisis, and then you normalize it. Well, you offer the solution and you normalize it. Was that the intended? Because ever since then, Australia's been getting hammered, like economically, especially on the East Coast with the inflation and gas and energy prices, house prices, like the flooding the place with unbelievable amounts of people, and it's just making life miserable for everyone, you know. Was that the thing, to get people so distrustful of government that you're ready for their solution, you know?
That's a possibility. I heard that in the run up to this election here in the States. I heard a similar kind of an idea where, you know, this whole thing that Trump was running against Biden, and then they deem him unfit, so he steps aside and he's running against Harris, and all of this. And then what happened before, in the 4 years before that, I've heard it might have even been Neil Foster that said they just want to get people to the place where you say, well, this doesn't work. Obviously, national governments don't work, or the electoral process doesn't work, you know, or there's so much corruption in your political system that when they bring forth whatever their solution might be, whatever that might look like, people are ready to take it. And they're saying, well, yeah, obviously, same. I mean, I could see whatever GFC, right? Whatever the next GFC is. See, I learned is that that could be the thing that says, well, obviously we can't go on with cash and money and that kind of thing. We're going to have to do some kind of what is it going to be, a combination of universal basic income and a digital currency of some form. Yeah, I still don't know what the biggest change is, but I do think that a distrust or a mistrust of government is an intentional consequence of this.
Yeah, I'm starting to think. I mean, you always go back to Yuri Bezmenov and his flow chart of their process of subversion, and I think he explained it better than anyone now, because it was real world that the Soviets had done elsewhere. And then you see the same things happening in here, and you can just pick where you are. He did that in one of his books. There was a flow chart and you can pick where you are. And we're sort of in a demoralisation, going into crisis phase of the plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
But you could see the last scam that happened. You could see how it was planned and how they got all the ducks in a row before they did it. Because I remember it would have been like 2018. All your health records were going digital. So I was like, oh yeah, what they're doing here now? This is in Australia, so it's like including all your, arm spears, whatever you want to call them. So, and then as soon as this kicked off, I thought, oh yeah, you know what's coming here. They're gonna push this on you. And like Alan used to say, if you don't have it, you're not getting food or anything.
That's right.
And it almost got to that point here where the only thing you're allowed to do if you hadn't had it, and I never had it, I lost my job over it, was go to the supermarket. That was it. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go to restaurants or anything, or you couldn't even go to get takeaway alcohol if you wanted that, if you'd not had it.
Yeah. I mean, my first encounter with a QR code was during Operation C. I had never seen one. I'd never heard of one. I didn't know what it is. Now they're ubiquitous now. So, but this is, and so much of 2020, we were locked down or told that we could only go into town for essential things, or, this is what you can do. And, and we lived kind of out in the country, and we'd plan our trips anyway. Don't want to be going back and forth all the time, but we did a big trip in at some point, and I can't tell you when in 2020 that it was, but to get some groceries and do some errands. And it was still fairly locked down, where the things that you were supposed to be doing were essential. Like if you need to go to the pharmacy, you need to go to the doctor, you need to go to the grocery shop. But they had, no, it was maybe the tail end of that, because they were starting to open up some restaurants, but under certain very controlled, like how a certain amount in at the restaurant at a time, otherwise no. And so we pull up in the parking lot of a place where we like to go get a hamburger. And Alan said, see if they're open, if they're doing business yet, because not all of the restaurants were open. So I got out of the car and I ran over there and I said, well, they are open. The door is locked, but they will let you into the restaurant if you scan something called a QR code. See, I didn't even. So if you scan something called a QR code on a phone and then text them a message, they will notify you when it's safe for you to be in the restaurant, because they can only have, X amount of people in there at the same time. So I'm sure Alan was listening to me talk as if I was speaking some language that he had never heard of. And he said, well, I guess we're not going to be eating a hamburger today.
Not messing
I said,
about
well, I
with
can
that.
make one at home. I'll make you a hamburger when we get home. But no, we're not going to have one at the restaurant. And now, now you do it. Now you scan a QR code if you need to.
Ordering through all these,
and everybody knows what it is. Yeah, everybody knows. At least everybody knows what it is. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what it was, and they had been around for years. I did not know what one was. I think I'd noticed it around like Bitcoin. When I was doing a little research around Bitcoin, I'm like seeing a weird little thing that you're, some kind of an image, and I'm starting to get the concept of things that get scanned. But
yeah, did you think during that period there was a component to it of mocking the public as well?
I always think there's a
like they got like I don't know if you ever listen to Thomas Sheridan. No, Alan did a show of him with Neil a while back, but Thomas had always gone about burlesquing people, so they'd burlesque you to publicly mock you and humiliate you as part of a ritual, and that it just seemed like that through all those stupid restrictions and rules, and it was, blatantly obvious. It didn't make. There was no logic to it. You were safe if you did this, if you sat here, but if you stood up, you weren't safe. And it's like, come on, the people must know this is a farce, But it's like you're publicly mocking you before the.
No, I personally, I mean, I always have the sense that I see the public being mocked. I'm always picking up on that. I just dancing nurses, applauding,
banging pots and pans.
Yeah. All of this is just, how foolish can we make people look? How much ridiculous nonsense can we get them to accept as real? Yeah, I definitely see a component of that. And I still do. I mean, I see this. For me, the U.S. elections were just full of that, full of the symbolism of royalty and excess, just horrible excess, here in the States. And it's very clear that it's a bunch of tech billionaires that are calling the shots. And I think it's global because these are global corporations, but I really think that that's what we're seeing. And it is mocking us if you really do think that given this kind of fascist or corporate input into how your countries are run, that you're, living in a democracy or a republic of some sort. Is just ludicrous to me.
Yeah, it's the merger of state and corporate interests, and Benito Mussolini had a name for that, didn't he? People are all right with it because it's our guy. He's bought Twitter and he's opened it up, and all these other people, and it's like they don't see it, do they?
It's really. It astonishes me that people believe even the stories that were told about all of these rich men, how they, invented this or bought this or started this. And, to me, it's just so transparent that there are front men who were picked and groomed. One of the biggest template examples is the Maurice Strong from Canada, who's
picked up from Rockefeller.
And to me, when I look at whether it's a Zuckerberg or a Musk or Bill Gates, you just name one, you see the same kind of they're brought up from a pretty young age, and then they're given this story, and what it's like to get through your day and do things. I mean, even if you had a staff, let's say, and you had your own personal secretary, and then you had a team doing this, do we really believe that it's possible for Elon Musk, even with a huge staff and someone kind of guy, that he's really doing all of the things that we're told that he does on a day-to-day basis? To me, this is just farce, and that's a mockery of the public.
Yeah, you can, there's these rags to riches stories, and they're just a joke, aren't they? I mean, you just look at them and go, you're a product. Somebody's made you to do a job, Yeah. And that's without, and I don't know about you, but I come from a rough area. You can spot PS a mile off, can't you? If you got your streetwise, you can just spot it, and you go, "Nah, you're just full of it, mate." Yes.
Yeah.
And
then you're
people
given,
lap it up, though, don't they? Yeah.
They do, and I think one of the reasons that they do is, again, it's the introduction of the element of something that's really unnatural into your life, and so you begin to see whatever's on the television or the internet or the radio or the iPhone or, as somehow being more real than you're like, oh, those are your thoughts, mate. Just roll with it. It's more real than what's in your very head. All of this nonsense. So you just, like I said, just kind of scrolling, just seeing what are they saying today. Well, one of the stories that I noticed doing that this morning was Grimes. Okay, so if you don't know, Grimes is some.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's married,
yes.
and she ain't had the kid with him.
Yeah.
Kid's name's an equation or something, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. No, that is not a name. But,
Yeah.
So anyway, she's some Canadian singer, performer, or whatever, and she's very upset with him for letting their toddler run around the stage when he was doing a press conference with Trump. See, this is it's part of the wrestling theater.
Yeah.
I got really fascinated this week with what do they call it? WWE World Wrestling Entertainment or something,
Yeah.
whatever it's. Yeah, because I don't even remember why I did the dive into that world, but for some reason I did, and I gave it about an hour and a half of looking up all about wrestling and Trump's involvement in it and the whole history of this wrestling franchise that goes back, and some sex trafficking scandal and the various names. And okay, so one of the woman who was married to the guy who's like third generation wrestler, and he's the owner of this company now, and he and his wife are separated for the past year because of the sex trafficking scandal. McMahon.
Vince McMahon,
And,
yeah, his wife Linda or
yeah.
something, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Linda she is now the head. She's Trump's pick to be, I don't think she's been confirmed yet, but she's Trump's pick to be the head of the National Education Association.
Yeah, I remember reading that. Yeah.
Yeah. And before that, in his first administration, she was the head of the Small Business Association. And something that I was reading about the wrestling, it said that there was something that came out in the 70s, some story, some case, and because of the case, it was taxes they were going to have to pay. Because of the taxes that they were going to have to pay, they made sure that they said in the 70s that wrestling is really not a sport. It's a form of entertainment. Because the taxes were going to be different.
Yeah.
If they did. So it just gave me a different, I mean, I've always thought of politics as a kind of theater, but this just really cemented it for me that is exactly what we're watching. And because the thing with wrestling is you don't just have, I know what got me started on it. In book club, Graham, who's from Scotland, sent me a video to use for my illustration. And it was a 70s bout between Man Mountain. No, it was Billy somebody or some guy. Anyway, and
Giant Haystacks. Yeah, it's British wrestling.
I didn't know. Yeah. All those years that Alan would say that.
And Big Daddy.
I thought he just
that was the other one.
Yeah, it was Big Daddy. That was it. Okay.
Mm.
So all those years, when I'd be editing the audio or whatever, and Alan would use that wrestling analogy, and he'd say, I think he'd say Mountain Man, and it was Man Mountain. But anyway, he'd say, "Oh, it's Mountain Man versus Giant Haystack," and I'd say to myself, I'd be thinking, "Oh, Alan, could you not come up with a better name? Really, those names are so ridiculous." But of course, I never said anything because it's Alan. I'm not going to go say, "Hey, Alan, come up with a better name." Now I know they're real. They were real people. I couldn't even believe it when he sent me that video, and I'm watching this bout between, what was his name again? The other one, Giant
Big Daddy and
Big Daddy.
Giant
Yeah.
Beast. Yeah.
Yeah.
His name was
So
Leslie. Leslie had like a female name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was Leslie, and he
Yeah.
got teased a lot. They said that Leslie was a British name for years and years, but I can't remember his last name. I think it started with a P, like Pembroke or something, but anyway, it was Leslie. So all those years, I never knew that Alan was drawing from real characters from the wrestling world, and that just blew me away. So that was what got me started. So I'm researching into the wrestling, going, wow, what a world that I never really knew about or paid attention to. But this is what we live under. The analogy that Alan made, it was so, you couldn't be, and I know he said it for years, and it's like, well, Melissa, he said it for years, how could you not see it? But it's like, you've got to, it's with anything about your reality, you've got to see it for yourself. You know what I mean? So the fact that Alan said politics is wrestling, you hear it intellectually, you go, okay, yes, politics is wrestling, but it's when you really can see that for yourself that the light goes on in a particular thing. And then it's like, that's exactly what we live under. There's no other way to see it. And the thing about the wrestling theater is they're not just doing this in the ring. See, they have backstories. That was the thing that was so fascinating. I don't remember now because all the names, but they have, the good guy has a persona. Yeah, and face. It's got a name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
face.
oh, look at you. You know wrestling.
And the bad guy's
all right,
the heel.
So
I thought. And then you've got the kayfabe, which is the...
Yes, okay, good. Oh, this is great. So the face is the good guy and the heel is the villain. But they don't just do this in the ring. The whole heel-face battle, the feud, is played out all the time.
Yeah, they call that kayfabe. Kayfabe, they call it for some reason. So even outside the arenas and in public, you've got to maintain that backstory that you do hate each other, and So because just funny you say this, I recently read Bret Hart's book. Bret Hart from the Canadian wrestler. He was massive in the 80s and 90s. And
I know. I've heard of him now.
And it was like a big no-no if you were seen with your supposed enemy in a bar having beers after an event. Like, that was a big taboo back then. Like, the wrestlers had maintained this kayfabe, like they really hated each other, in real life, backstage. Whatever. It's the same as politics, isn't it?
It is the same, and that's really, Alan said it. He said it, and I'd be, okay, yes, I hear you intellectually, but it's like, oh no, it really is. So the kayfabe.
Yeah. So that's that's like keeping up the act, basically.
So that is what we're seeing. So that, like, the kayfabe, I've got to bring this whole wrestling thing into my whole vocabulary now, because I've been amazed at what I've learned. Is the kayfabe is when Musk will say, "Oh, Sam Altman bad, open AI, he bad, and I'm going to buy it," and this is wrestling.
Yeah. We just need
it's amazing.
We're just waiting for Trump to do his heel turn, now. So that's what they call it when a face goes bad. They call it a heel turn. So then that's probably coming.
Well, you can get the setup. The first foreign leader that he brings over to meet with is Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And then he makes this crazy statement about what needs to happen with all the Gazans, and
Yeah.
so you're all going, what,
His
So
real
maybe
estate
his heel
deal.
turn is happening.
I mean, who didn't see that coming, It was,
Yeah.
but it's, despite the history of the place or whatever, you're talking about moving people out of where they're from forcibly.
Yeah.
You do that anywhere. There's a name for that, and it's a pretty big crime, but he talks about that, and he's, still gets cheered on.
Yeah.
And it's like what Alan says, what
I,
happens when that big eating machine comes back to your shores and it starts doing that to you? You'll cheer it on overseas, but there's come a time and it'll end up in your own country, won't it?
I'm not sure exactly when that eating machine comes back here. I think they still have some tasks, unfortunately, for the young American men to go and,
Yeah.
boots on the ground somewhere. So,
Well, what's interesting is Trump was talking about ending the war in the Ukraine and about the 350 billion or something they've given him, and for the American assets and investments with regard to rare earths and other mineral wealth that Ukraine has. That BlackRock, prior to the invasion and all the rest of it, supposedly bought into. But now old Zelensky came out saying, yeah, we've got all that stuff, but unfortunately the majority of those resources are now in Lugansk and Donetsk, and they're under Russian control.
Of course,
So,
yeah.
Read between the lines what they want to do there, So they want to make a deal, won't he? So what's part of the deal? So I don't think the Russians would be keen on handing it back, will they?
No. But I heard that Trump and Putin had a peace talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a talk with Bill Gates for 3 hours, apparently, didn't he? As well.
Yeah. And Bill said with his usual hand motion that he really liked where, Trump's head was around public health.
Alan used to crack me up with that, wearing his lavender sweater, waving his arms about. Casually talking about Malthusian politics and whatever, policies. Just because he's this nerdy looking guy in a lavender sweater, you let him get away with it,
Yeah. I tell you what, though, boy, Alan did not like that man. I mean, it's seldom have I seen that thing, where you could just know that if two men were in the same room, poor Bill's not going to make it out alive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying you watch him and you feel your blood pressure just this weaselly little guy, and he's talking all this stuff and just the worst intentions possible,
Absolutely. No, that I think that you've really nailed it. That was it with Alan. Whenever I'd see him reading about or watching Bill Gates, you could just I could feel Alan just ready to reach through the screen, and it's gonna yeah. Because why can't everybody else see that? I mean, how people can have the double think to see that to see what he's done and to hear the words come out of his own mouth, and he's a mealy-mouthed little nobody. He knows nothing. I mean, this is the thing that's just the hardest, I think, about listening to him weigh in on anything is, maybe it's just me, but he just seems like such an idiot. Even when he's talking about Microsoft, it's like,
Yeah, it's apparent he's not the brains behind Microsoft, eh?
Just an idiot, but a malevolent, evil, dark, black-eyed, black-souled,
Yeah,
in this lavender
I don't
sweater.
know. It, it's as if, I don't know if demon possession's real or whatever, but it seems to be with these people. You look at him and you think there's something else in there, you know.
That's, that's funny that you say that too, Sam, because I've had the exact same thing about both he and his wife when they were married. At the height of all of this, I was just studying them one day on film and thinking, there's no there except for something else. In other
Yeah,
words, you really are an idiot. Somebody else has to be in charge there. And I had this kind of visual imaginary little thing one day where I imagined that Bill and Melinda were being driven by the chauffeur to the press conference, and they go out and do that thing where she smiles, like this smile that is, ooh, it's creepy. Her smile is just,
yeah,
I hate you, but I'm smiling. And he's just, with the lavender sweater and the hands waving, creep. And they do the press conference, and they're in the back of the limousine, but they're not talking because the batteries kind of winding down. And then the chauffeur gets out, and he just picks them up by the back of their sweaters, and he carries them into the mansion, and then there's hooks by the front door, and he hangs them from the back of the hook, the
yeah,
sweater there. And then the lights just go down off the little battery operated people, except it's demonic, and that's it. And they just hang on the hook. What got me on that little imagination one day is, boy, to be a fly on the wall in their
yeah.
mansion and hear what's going on. And then I just took that and I'm like, well, there's nothing going on. This is just pure evil. Well, how does that operate? Oh, I see. They just get hung on a hook, and then they get lifted up and taken out to the next press conference. And then evil works right through them, says what
It
evil will, and does what evil does.
it has to be. I do recall Alan talking in the past about perfect possession in one of his talks, and
Me, several. Yeah.
yeah, and well, through the deeds you know them, and just look at the deeds, and there's pure evil. There's
Mm-hmm.
no other word for it. Like, it's not just a few bad things. What they've got in mind and what they've planned for everyone. Like, that's not normal, is it? That's evil. There's no other word for it, you know.
It is evil. It's not human.
Yeah, there's no humanity there, you know.
It is not human. And yeah, I mean, one story that Alan told, you remember the one he told where Malachi Martin was in the library with the guy, and Malachi just gets a glimpse of him, and he understands he's looking at perfect possession. This is a Catholic priest perspective, but he
Mm,
understands what he's seeing. And there was a recognition, and Alan was describing that, where when evil that is inhabiting that recognizes that it's been spotted,
yeah,
but there's no discomfort there. In other words, if you believe in, or if you've had experience with, and I think it's a better way to say that, because I don't think it's a belief system, you've experienced it or you have
yeah,
not. But if you've experienced it, then you understand that they have to have a vessel. These entities must have a vessel.
yeah,
And I think that's what they have in, little lavender sweatered creeps, is
yeah.
a vessel.
Well, I think have you ever heard of Jerry Marzinsky, Melissa?
Yes, I have. Yes, I
Yeah,
have.
and his work where he did in the prison system with schizophrenics and stuff, and he like they all had the same traits and they all did the same things, and it's like it's weird. Like, why would they all have the same patterns, and then he went into the religious side of it, and he says these are just possessed people. And have you ever listened to any of his talks he's done on that?
Well, it's just so interesting. No, to answer you, to answer your question, no, I haven't. But it's interesting because if you'd asked me 2 days ago if I'd heard of Jerry Marzinsky, and I would have said no.
Yeah.
But just yesterday, someone sent me that talk, and I haven't listened to it yet.
The
but
synchronicity,
it was, some. Yeah, exactly. Woo! But so now, yes, I have heard of him, and I have heard of those talks, and I was sent one of those, and it was his observation about psychopathy versus possession. This is something that Alan talked about quite a bit, because, the question is, what are you looking at? And this is what Alan said from his own observation, is the traits that you see, that you ascribe to a psychopath, are identical to the traits that you see in someone who's perfectly possessed. So what are you looking at? And he's even said that on a few blurbs. I wouldn't be able to point you to them, but he has said it, perhaps to say that a perfectly possessed person is a religious way, or a religious understanding of describing the psychopath. But I do know that Alan understood evil.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you say, you have people who are born psychopathic, and then people become proto-psychopaths, maybe through their actions and experiences, where the end point is they end up with something else inside them. And that's how they become. So they never started out like that, as opposed to the others that are born that way. So you make yourself susceptible to that kind of. I mean, I know a little bit about the occult, and there's certain things you don't mess around with, and else bad things do happen. And yeah, I mean, I've followed Thomas Sheridan for years and chatted to him before, and he'll say certain things like that side of the world is real, and the people that rule the world, they think it's real too, because a lot of the pronouncements and everything are done on certain days and certain astrological lineups and other things, so that they don't just do that by accident.
Right.
Like I remember all the announcements in the UK for all the lockdowns and what have you. They were all on like solstices and other days and different other holidays. So these people believe in it. So.
Absolutely, and I've even heard. I once actually heard Alan say that to Jackie Petru, very on a recording, very identically to what you just said. He was saying to Jackie, doesn't matter what you believe or what I tell you that I believe, I'm telling you what they believe. And it's important to understand what they believe, because then that is how they operate, and that's the system that they're operating in at the highest level.
Yeah,
it
seems to be, like you said, that they do believe in, seems to be like the karmic side of it, whereas they've got to tell you in one way or another what they're doing, and if you agree to it, then they'll do it, because they say, well, we've shown you, we've told you.
That's right.
You didn't do anything, so we're going to do it now. So, but there must be something to it, or else they wouldn't pay any attention to it like they don't pay any attention to us, because they feel there's no consequence, basically, do they? They can do pretty much what they like sometimes.
Yeah. So the little one in the background.
Oh, you could, yeah, I suppose you could. There's two of them, yeah. There's
Oh,
two
really? How
children.
old are they?
6
If you
and
don't
3.
mind saying. Ah,
Yeah, so they're a bit keep you busy, that's for sure.
boy, girl, or two
Yeah,
girls,
the
or
eldest is a boy, and the youngest is a girl. Yeah.
okay, yeah, that sounded like a girl squealing to my ear.
I was trying to mute some of it.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right. Well, that's cool. No, because all these years of emails or chatting or whatever, I did not know that you had little toddlers. So yeah,
Yeah. And
it's
it's
good.
interesting, eh? Like, I know Alan said it before. Like, they're so perceptive and they work things out. You just in their own way. The questions they
Mhm.
asked, it's like, wow, how have you come around to asking those about how things actually work? And they're sharp, eh? You'd be surprised, like,
Mhm.
how sharp they are.
That's neat.
It's the best, the biggest question that not many people ask is why, Kids are always asking why,
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Why does that happen? Why does that happen? And maybe that's what school does, is to remove the why out of you, so you just go along with everything.
Boy, that's the truth. I think that is the
Yeah.
truth. Well, I better get going here. I have a feeling, yes, that I'm feeling correctly. So,
No,
but
that's all good.
this has
Yeah.
been fun. Yeah.
No, I enjoyed it, miss. It was good to chat with you.
Yeah. Very nice to chat with you. And I hope that you have all enjoyed this. My schedule has been a little bit crazy with some personal obligations. And I think it's going to be kind of just trying to fit things in, not let everything go altogether, but get these personal things done. But next week is I think the Thursday is the 5th of March, and I am going to be discussing the science fiction novel We with Nick Hayes. And it is actually today that we're talking is, I'm going to just tell everybody, it's the 13th of February. And I haven't started reading We yet. But by the time this video gets posted on the 27th of February, I'm sure I will have read it. So I'll be ready to talk to Nick on the 3rd. So thank you very much for listening. And I'll be back next week with Nick. All right, take care.